Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two just to let everybody log in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm Donna Smith from the Social Justice Resource Center. And before we get started with our great panelists, I wanted to tell you a little bit about two programs at Center of Life. The first one is the Art of Change exhibit. And in this program, we're asking all of our friends, no matter what your age, to submit a piece of creative art that expresses what social justice means to you. It can be a poem, a drawing, an essay, you name it. If you can send a digital image or file, we want to see it and we will showcase it over the next few months. I'll put the link in the chat with more details about how you can submit to the exhibit. And the second program I wanted to tell you about is the Ambassadors of Justice program, which is a paid summer teen program where teens can learn more about social justice and how they can make a positive impact in their communities. The link, I will also put that link in the chat. Again, thanks so much for spending this hour with us. We are so excited to learn more about the Abolitionist Law Center and Court Watch and for us to learn how we can get involved in those really great programs. And now I'm going to turn it over to Danielle Shakowski, who is the moderator for this program.
Hi, everyone. So we are here tonight with Abolitionist Law Center. We have Joshua Palmer, who is the Abolitionist Law Center Court Watch volunteer, Dolly Prabhu, who is the Abolitionist Law Center staff attorney. Later this evening, Daria Karabi will be joining us. She is a volunteer court watcher. And unfortunately, Kimberly Harriel was not able to join us this evening, but we do have a video where she will be telling us about her experience that we'll be showing you. And then we will start off. Josh will give us a presentation that will give us a rundown of the Abolitionist Law Center, their court watch and their court watch initiative. Then we'll hear from our panelists, discuss their personal experiences as court watch volunteers and how to get involved, as well as probations and how the court watch has impacted Dolly's work in this area. Throughout the evening, there will be time for Q&A. You can put any questions you may have in the Q&A box or the chat. Any questions that are not answered throughout the night will be sent to the panelists, and answers will be emailed to attendees, as well as a recording of the webinar. So we'll make sure that we get all of your questions answered. And also at the end of this, you will learn how to become a court watcher, which is exciting. So Josh, if you want to start with your presentation, go right ahead.
Hi everybody, thanks Danielle for that great intro. Super happy to be here in collaboration with SJRC. Like Danielle said, I am the volunteer coordinator for the Court Watch program at the Abolitionist Law Center, and we are here today to try to get more people involved. So before we start, I'm going to drop a link in the chat to our orientation proper. This is going to be next Monday evening at 6 p.m. So register there on Mobilize if you'd like, and we can get into more specifics. This is going to be kind of a condensed version of the orientation that you'll get. Then we'll go into much more detail about strategy and logistics and stuff. But for now, we'll just get started on an overview of our work. So let me get this pulled up and share my screen. All right. So first off, just a little bit of background about the Abolitionist Law Center. The Abolitionist Law Center was founded in 2013 as a public interest law firm by a few then graduates of the University of Pittsburgh's law program, working with people on the inside, advocating for human rights of those incarcerated. And over the last decade or so, we really expanded a lot of our work, but to share our most recent mission statement, the Abolitionist Law Center is a nonprofit law firm fighting to defend prisoners and abolitionists, and a community organizing project aiming to build a world without police and prisons. So during the first decade of ALC's work, we did a ton of stuff, such as right at the top, abolishing death row solitary confinement in Pennsylvania was a pretty big win. We've also done initiatives throughout the country, including stopping the potentially most expensive proposed federal prison out in Kentucky, and other things, just making sure that prisoners' medical needs are being met inside jail, advocating for the release of political prisoners, people like Mumia Abu-Jamal, and one of our more recent initiatives, reframing life without parole as death by incarceration in the public lexicon. So trying to reframe that idea of any sentence of a life sentence without parole is virtually a death by incarceration. It's literally a death by incarceration. So we're trying to sort of attack the system on all fronts in that regard. Since 2020, we've really expanded a lot of our work. In addition to launching our Court Watch program, we also launched Straight Ahead, which is our lobbying arm of our organization, so that we can, for progressive legislation to strategically dismantle the criminal legal system. But we've also done mutual aid work, getting money to the impacted people's families. We've also filed lawsuits against the police following the brutality against protesters at the 2020 George Floyd rebellion. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm a little sniffly here, forgive me. And like I said before, advocating for the release of longtime political prisoners who have spent years and years and years in solitary confinement. And we also have some initiatives and campaigns around ending solitary confinement completely. Here in Allegheny County, we actually successfully passed a referendum, ending solitary confinement in Allegheny County. It's been a bit tumultuous actually enforcing that, but that was a pretty historic win on our front. So this is a little graphic that sort of illustrates the way that we look at the system and how we go about working to dismantle it. And we see all of these different points as interconnected. From policing to the courts themselves to detention, especially pre-trial and pre-hearing detention and probation, which Dolly will talk about a little bit later here, and then incarceration proper, looking at stuff like extreme sentencing, the conditions people are facing in confinement, making sure that their constitutional rights are being met. And then another big campaign of ours is the push to release the ill and the elderly from prisons. Looking more at the Court Watch side of things, this is Salim Holbrook, our executive director. Salim was actually sentenced to death by incarceration as a juvenile, and is worked with our founding members to create the Abolitionist Law Center, and is actually released in, I believe, 2018, and then moved into position as our executive director. So this is from a feature in Politico about reshaping the judiciary. People might be familiar with the push over the last few years to sort of reshape prosecutors' offices. Larry Krasner's a big name as far as progressive reform, but there's a similar movement building right now to really change up the judiciary. Anyways, I really like this quote from this feature from Salim, because I think it really gets at our work at Court Watch. She says, "The thing with judges' power, it's like oxygen, right? You're not really conscious of oxygen until you're deprived of it. And with judges, you're not conscious of their power until you're in their courtroom or you see them obstructing your interests to the judicial system." And I think that just really encapsulates the extent to which, how much discretion and power judges have in their day-to-day rulings as people move through the system. They have an extreme amount of power over people's lives, and the vast majority of the public simply don't really register the extent of that power and the consequences of the way that judges use that power, which is a central part of what we're trying to do in Court Watch, is trying to just get people in there and see how other members of their community, their neighbors, are being treated before these judges. So a little bit more about where we're coming from politically. We very much see the United States court system as an apartheid system, when we understand apartheid as a policy or system of segregation or discrimination on the grounds of race. So some of these statistics here are included in our docket reports. I'm going to drop a link to our docket reports. This is a big part of our public reporting aspect of Court Watch, where we scrape dockets, incoming dockets for all new people arrested. And then we take a look at that from a particular time range, and then analyze the data and show it back out to the public. So one such statistic or two here is when we look at these arrest demographics, African Americans make up 13% of the county population here in Allegheny County, and yet 56% of all arrests. And when we look just at the city of Pittsburgh, they make up 23% of the Pittsburgh population, and yet 70% of all arrests. And then if we look at the process after arrest, we look at bail, Black Pittsburghers are 26.5% more likely to be subjected to secured monetary bail than non-Black community members, meaning that they must pay their bail amount in full or else be forced into confinement at the Allegheny County Jail. So that's just one small slice of what you can find in our docket reports. But I think that really reveals the extent to which this is just very blatantly an apartheid system, which is why we're trying to pursue a very radical vision for how to reshape it. So what is a Court Watch? It's pretty self-explanatory, really. We were just trying to get lay people into the courts to see what's going on and observe, watch, and hold accountable the actors of the court. I'm going to drop a link to a piece from The Appeal about the Court Watch movements in the US. And through that, and with the broader implementation of Court Watch programs throughout the country, holding the system accountable through observation and data collection, it's really crucial within the broader goal of police and prison abolition, because the courts are this really crucial node between policing and prisons themselves. So similar to sit-ins of the modern civil rights era, by placing our bodies in a space normally occupied only by consumers of the court, we're staging an act of protest in a way, right? We're just literally changing the dynamics of the room by having our bodies present. And attempting to shift the status quo and demand a shift away from the current penal form of prosecution and toward modes of transformative justice and accountability. So more specifically, our Court Watch program, we're committed to transformative racial justice by keeping the courts accountable through observation, data collection, and public reporting. And so, like I said, a big piece of that is our docket reports, but also just staying in communication with the public about what's going on in the court system. to share some of our wins over since we first started. Right at the start, we started in 2020, which means that we started right as the pandemic hit, and so our first big campaign was to pressure the courts to adopt a remote access infrastructure via Microsoft Teams. And so with our allies, we were able to pressure them and get access via Microsoft Teams to actually see what's going on in those courts. Unfortunately, since about June of last year, they started rolling back the remote access. And so another one of our campaigns right now is to continue to pressure the courts to actually use the remote access infrastructure that's already there as a matter of accessibility and justice as well. But some other things, we successfully pushed for the resignation of racist Judge Mark Tranquilli. That's him here. You might have seen him in the news. I'll drop a link to a story on that. He was caught making some blatantly racist remarks, actually by other attorneys in closed chambers, and that actually triggered a public investigation about just his long history of very alarming and racist behavior. And so with our allies, we were able to organize to put public pressure on him, and as he was a liability to the court system, we were able to force his resignation. So that's just one example. Of course, Mark Tranquilli is not the only one in our court system right now who is just an abhorrent racist, but that was a big win, and I think it really communicated to the courts that we were, here to stay and here to actually hold them accountable. We also recently worked to demand that the Jail Oversight Board cancel contracts for deadly riot training at the ACJ from Joseph Garcia and his committee Seesaw. It was also in the news. Drop a link there in the chat. So I'm peppering everybody with links, but we're really proud of these. So, we mobilized our base and were able to coordinate with folks who also spend a lot of time watching the Jail Oversight Board meetings. And again, this shows how our Court Watch program is really integrated into a lot of different facets when it comes to prisons and policings. So that was a very long campaign, but we were able to successfully pressure the board, and they ended up voting to cancel the contracts. Unfortunately, he's still operating out and about. He's a very dangerous man. His trainings have led to deaths of incarcerated people. And he's currently working in York County, Pennsylvania, but they're also, I think there's a class action lawsuit against him there as well. Most recently, we were able to successfully advocate for the release of a 15-year-old boy who was dubiously charged with a felony, and because he was charged with a felony, he was considered to be unbailable and thus spent months and months at the Allegheny County Jail. And so we were able to, again, mobilize our base and send court support, gather letters of support, and we're able to convince the judge that he should be released on bail. And we're going to continue to show court support. Aside from the big headline wins, we really see our biggest wins when we're able to advocate for people just moving through the system every day, and that really comes from volunteer court watchers. So one example being, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember, a court watcher saw someone actually have a seizure in the middle of a hearing and informed us about it. They had a seizure in the middle of their hearing and they were just kind of carted away back to ACJ. But because we had a court watcher there, we were able to get in contact with the jail and try to figure out what's going on. And we discovered that the jail had either suspended or just neglected their methadone treatment program. So this was not just something that was affecting this one person, but in fact, we were able to pressure the courts to restart that methadone program. There's another recent case where court watchers alerted us to a case in which a defendant's disability played a significant role in the circumstances of their arrest. So we were able to connect with our disability justice advocates who worked with local advocacy groups around disability justice to communicate with jail, make sure that this person's medical needs were being met. In addition to all that, we regularly organize court support for community members, especially for those protesters who were charged in the 2020 George Floyd uprisings. So, again, this is sort of, again, a connection between policing and court watching, in response to these massive mass mobilizations of protests against police brutality. Inevitably, people got charged, and even as the mass upheaval died down, we still have to support the people who were on the streets. So that's really part of our mission here as well. Just this morning, actually, we organized court support for two people who were charged with rioting. And our Court Watchers notes also fuel our advocacy for our community defense hub. A link to that as well. So many links. Sorry, I did not anticipate this many links. I was sprucing up my presentation. It's not really letting me. So community defense is a participatory community defense is a particular model of organizing and advocacy for families with loved ones facing charges. So we bring people into the fold and work with them to give them advice on how to proceed and support them really as their loved ones are facing charges and moving through the system. And it's a self-sustaining model too, because the people who we bring into the fold then stick around and help out the next person that comes in. So that 15-year-old that I was talking about earlier, we were able to bring them in the fold through the participatory hub, and that 15-year-old's mother is now an integral part of our advocacy efforts. Right. So I've been talking a lot, and I'll wrap up here, but I wanted to share this quote from James Baldwin. This is from a book of his called No Name in the Street that I was reading recently and not expecting to really actually find anything about prisons, but there was a passage where he's reflecting on his attempts to advocate for a friend of his who had been imprisoned in New York for 4 years under false charges. And yet he's here reflecting on his experiences and his perception of them. And so I'll just read it. Whoever wishes to know who is in prison in this country has only to go to the prisons and watch who comes to visit. The visitors have come looking for a miracle. The miracle will be to find someone who really cares about the people in prison, but no one can afford to care. The prison is overcrowded, the calendar's full, the judge is busy, the lawyer's ambitious, the cops zealous. What does it matter if someone gets trapped here for a year or two, gets ruined here, goes mad here, commits murder or suicide here? I do not claim that everyone in prison is innocent, but I do claim that the law as it operates is guilty, and that the prisoners therefore are all unjustly imprisoned. And I think that that just really encapsulates the work that we do as court watchers, right? Because we're not here to try to ascertain guilt or innocence for anybody moving through the system. That's not our goal at all. But rather we come from a position of recognizing that the system itself is rotten and violent and corrupt. And therefore, anybody who moves through it, whether they have or have not done harm, deserves to be advocated for. They deserve justice in their own right, and why we need to push forward to a place where we have real transformative and accountable justice, not this brutally punitive form. So I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh. That was great. And now, Dolly, would you like to tell us a little bit about probations and how this is all relevant to your work?
Yeah, sure. And before I do, I just want to emphasize that is a really great quote and really gets to, like, I think the heart of a lot of like abolitionist beliefs. I think a lot of, which I know is not what we're discussing today, but since it is relevant, I think a lot of people do say, like their response to abolition is often, what about the violent criminals? Which doesn't take into account the fact that even what people would describe as violent criminal, that is a very small percentage of people who are incarcerated, and it does not in any way compare to the vast cruelty and violence inflicted by this system day in and day out. So once you get, and once you start court watching, which I hope some of you do, I think you'll very quickly understand this if you don't already. But back to what I'm supposed to be talking about. So my name's Dolly. I'm an attorney at the Abolitionist Law Center, and my work focuses on probation. And the reason I focus on that, which is I focus on that out of my own choosing. I was lucky to be able to do that. But the reason I chose that is because contrary to popular belief, probation is actually a driver of mass incarceration, at least as it functions today. So I know that, commonly it's thought of as, an alternative to incarceration. And so people are surprised to hear that, or surprised when I'm advocating against probation. But hopefully by the end of my little spiel, you'll understand more of why it actually increases rather than displaces incarceration. But before I get into too much other detail, I want to just kind of define probation, how it works for folks who aren't familiar. So probation is a sentence of community supervision. It involves some degree of supervision by a probation officer, and there are all sorts of conditions that folks on probation have to adhere to. It's different from parole in that it's a sentence that a judge will sentence you to probation, whereas parole is conditional early release. So for example, if someone's sentenced to 5 to 10 years of prison, then at their minimum sentence, 5 years, they would be eligible for parole, which they'd have to remain on through their maximum sentence if they were granted parole. So that's how parole works. But probation is something that judges either they sentence folks to probation alone, so just a, say, 6-month probation sentence, or they impose what's called a split sentence, where they sentence folks to a period of incarceration followed by a period of probation. So say a 1-year sentence of incarceration to be followed by 3 years of probation. And that's becoming increasingly common, which is part of why the probation population has grown so much, because judges are just by default tacking on probation to the end of all sorts of sentences. And for crimes where no punishment other than maybe a fine or something like that would have occurred, they're tacking on probation instead. So that's how this population has grown, and that's how probation is becoming an alternative to freedom rather than an alternative to incarceration. And then in terms of the conditions that folks have to adhere to when they're on probation, one condition that's universal is that you can't commit a new crime. That's what's called a direct violation. But there's also a host of other non-criminal conditions that folks have to adhere to, and it can be different per person. And judges really have the authority to impose almost anything as a condition of probation. So quite often you'll see, random drug tests as a condition of probation, and then having to pass those drug tests as a condition, having some kind of curfew, so you need to be home by 10 p.m. every day, not being able to leave the county without permission. Sometimes you're not allowed to speak to certain individuals. The judge will just decide, because it seems like it's trouble when you two get together, no contact between the two of you. Which can be based on almost nothing sometimes, and that can render someone homeless or jobless. Often folks have to pay fines or fees as conditions of their probation, or judges will say you have to attend, say, anger management classes or parenting classes. They'll just kind of tack those on without thought, but those, one, interfere with work, and two, those are expensive and defendants have to pay for them out of pocket. So some anger management classes are $75 a class. The DUI alternative to incarceration program is, I think, between $500 or $1,000, and it's like a one-time cost. So these are very steep, and often people are in violation of probation because they can't afford these. And so I go into that level of detail just to show that, probation really is a trap. Even for people who are relatively stable, it's very hard to adhere to all of these conditions. A lot of them are conflicting, like trying to find and maintain employment while also doing like 200 hours of community service and all of these programs, and not being able to leave the county, or not being able to work a night shift, or not being able to interact with certain people. So it's very hard to actually succeed on probation. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that a lot of people on probation are homeless and extreme poverty, have mental health issues that they're struggling to get treatment for. They are using substances and are possibly dealing with addiction. So all those other factors really are probation exacerbates the impacts of those rather than alleviating it. And that makes it so that people are really set up to fail. And then what happens when folks do violate their probation condition, and this is where I'm transitioning more into how Court Watch plugs in, is that they have two sets of hearings, basically. they have, and those hearings are called the Gagnon 1 hearing and a Gagnon 2 hearing. So I'm going to start backwards and start with their Gagnon 2 hearing. That is their actual probation violation hearing, where it's determined whether or not they did commit a probation violation. So up until that point, all of it is just an alleged probation violation, which can be that they committed a new crime, or it can be that they were out past curfew, or left a treatment program or something like that. So that's their Gagnon 2 hearing, and that can take months or even years to be scheduled. And sometimes it's years because they'll be scheduled after someone's trial if they do have a new charge. So it can take months or years for that to happen. But their Gagnon 1 hearing is what's called a probable cause hearing, where that happens really soon after someone's alleged violation or their arrest, if they are arrested, usually within 14 days. And that's where in theory, there should be a probable cause determination made that there is probable cause to show that this person committed a probation violation. And this is really important because unlike people who aren't on probation, folks on probation can be held on what's called a probation detainer, which basically means that they have to remain incarcerated up until their Gagnon 2 hearing, which again can take months or years. And so even if folks have bail set, even if they pay their bail, they're not allowed out if they have a probation detainer. And so that's part of how probation derives mass incarceration, and especially pretrial incarceration. So in our own county jail, the impact of the proportion of people who are in jail for probation because of probation detainers dwarfs the population of people who are in jail for cash bail. It's about, I think, a third of the jail is there just for that reason. So that's how, that's part of how probation is driving this problem. And that's also why Gagnon 1 hearings are so important, because that's people's first opportunity to challenge this probation violation before they have to sit for months waiting for their Gagnon 2 hearing. So thanks to Court Watch, we have begun observing both Gagnon 1 hearings and Gagnon 2 hearings. Neither of those things were easy. There was a lot of resistance at both points just to get access. And now that we've gotten access, it's just been so illuminating to the world of probation. So a lot of what happens, in these courtrooms is just, it's like a black box. There are people there, but there's no concept of really accountability or transparency. And a lot of things we didn't realize until we were consistently going in. Like, there are a lot of constitutional standards meant to protect defendants, and judges were routinely violating them. And one thing that shocked me when I started court watching is that I assumed at the very least the judges knew the law. And a second assumption is that if they know the law, that they'll adhere to it. And both of those things have been strongly disproven by our observations, which is really unfortunate, but we would not have known that unless we were in these courtrooms. So that allows us to not only help individuals in the way that Josh has described, but to also notice patterns of systematic constitutional violations, or even patterns of, a single judge being problematic. And so those are things that we can use in litigation, or even just give that information to reporters, or just publish just for transparency. So there's a lot that can be done. And even like now, prior to, we do have litigation plan based only on Court Watch observations, which is incredible. But even before that, we have all this ammo now to go in and talk to judges and court administration and say, listen, we have proof of systematic constitutional violations. You need to fix this, or, the underlying threat is litigation, So it's a very powerful tool. And there's a lot of times there's no other way to capture that information, because court transcripts are not easily available. They're very expensive to get. And a lot of qualitative observations, like judges yelling all the time or just making snide comments, those kind of things don't show up on a transcript as easily. So those are all things that it's been really, really helpful to have court watchers in the room for. So that's kind of how Court Watch and my work overlap a ton. We are super reliant on Court Watch at this point, with just helping build evidence for litigation, or even just for advocacy, all sorts of things. So it's a great program, and can't say enough good things about it.
I feel like I've learned so much about the court system that I didn't know before in this last half an hour. I had no idea that judges basically can just set probation rules with absolutely no checks or balances. That's insane. And I see how that is a very clear trap into getting incarcerated. And you said that about a third of Allegheny County Jail are people being held on probations.
Yeah, and it actually used to be half of the jail
Oh my gosh.
before, like just in 2020, I believe. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, I'm happy that there is a way to check these judges when they're doing these outrageous things. Thank you, Dolly. That was awesome. Very informative. And Daria, thank you for joining us. Happy you're with us tonight. I'm going to start by playing Kimberly's video that she sent in, and then we'll move to you and you can talk a little bit about your experience as a court watcher.
I don't think we can hear it. If you back out of the share screen and then make sure to click the little box that share sound, that should work.
All right, let me know if it works now. Sorry about that.
Hello, my name is Kim Harriel, and I live on the north side of Pittsburgh, and I've been a part of Court Watch for about 6 to 9 months now. I first became aware of Court Watch when I took a political leadership academy to learn more about the political process. And at that time, the conversation was about criminal justice reform. And so I heard about Court Watch, and I acquired into it, logged on to the site and read about it, and then subsequently volunteered to do Court Watch. And so I didn't do Court Watch right away because pandemic hit. When I did become a part of Court Watch, I actually went downtown to the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas and sat in on trials and took the notes and sent the notes back. Most recently, I started to do the GAG ones via the virtual platform, and filled out the paperwork and sent the paperwork back. And so I was to appear before you today on the panel to talk about Court Watch and how I became involved and how important it is that we do monitor the courtrooms for a whole lot of reasons. For me, it's about becoming aware and informed about the criminal justice system, not so much looking for improprieties or abuses, but more to understand the process. And for me, the personal stake is about racism and the fact that African Americans are disproportionately incarcerated, found guilty, fined exorbitant fees that they're unable to pay. And so, the criminal justice system is just one cog in a broken wheel of many cogs. And so at this particular time, is my small act of service to be present and to be seen in the courtroom, more for my people, which are in there more often than most people, to be seen by them, to know that someone is overseeing, monitoring, and reviewing the process, because you do identify yourself to the court, that you are there, who you are, and that you are part of Court Watch. And so hopefully they know what Court Watch is, or they'll do the investigation to find out what it is. The judges then are aware that Court Watch is in the room, bailiffs, people that are there to support defendants, and so, we want to get the word out, and we want to make people aware that, these things are being watched, monitored, and reviewed. And so I have every confidence in the data collection that Court Watch is doing. And I have every confidence and faith in our voting system and our voters that criminal justice reform is on the horizon. So thank you for letting me participate. And I hope this was the assignment. If not, they definitely are my feelings and my thoughts. Have a wonderful day. And until I can be of service again, we'll talk soon.
So Daria, would you like to also tell us a little bit about your experience with Court Watch?
Yeah, definitely. I guess to preface this, because I want to share some images, so I joined Court Watch in January 2021. I had just graduated from university, and I actually joined. I'd been wanting to join Court Watch for a while, but I was in school, and then they put out a call for a courtroom sketch artist. So I joined because I did art in school. So I figured I would share my sketches and also talk to you guys at the same time. So give me 1 second to open up my sketch and share the screen. And these are just going to be for my Google Drive, so I might have a little bit of a. So yeah, I joined Court Watch largely out of a sense of wanting to hold our criminal justice system accountable in some way. I think that, like, living in Pittsburgh year after year, I'd been hearing and participating in protests about murders by the police, and year after year there was no definitive, conclusive justice. Not that really there can be justice in that situation, but what it really brought to light for me was, like Dolly said, it really is a black box. It's so sealed from the outside such that when I walk into the courtroom, it feels like there's another set of standards and ethics for human behavior, and like morals. There is like Angela Davis said, I was thinking about this like on my drive here, prisons don't, I think it's like prisons don't like help people or cure people, they disappear people. And really that's the case. It's really like some of the most dehumanizing treatment of people that I have seen in my life, in my privileged life, to be fair. But I started watching during the pandemic. So I was watching by Microsoft Teams, which was a really unique experience. So I'm gonna give you some of my sketches from there. And I apologize for my chicken scratch here. But one thing that really stood out to me while I was watching is how many times and how often people who were being charged with a crime, or I mean, they weren't even charged yet, but who they were debating what to charge them with, weren't able to appear in court. For the longest time, because they were in quarantine units, they just wouldn't even be able to like participate in their own hearings. And when they could participate in their own hearings, you could barely hear them because they'd be in a room with like, I don't know how many other people, but if they unmuted themselves, they were virtually unrecognizable. So a lot of times what they would do is that they would submit a written statement. So this one is from someone, says, Judge Cashman, I'm sorry, I was wrong to run from police. I have several family members who were police officers, one who died on the job. I am so sorry, Your Honor. I have a family and daughter in the courtroom, and I plead leniency in your behalf, and I've been working really hard doing roofing this year, and I ask for your leniency. And I mean, more often than not, that's what people's personal statements are. It's true like remorse and just to plead for like mercy. And to be fair, like I was oftentimes put into Judge Mariani's court more than other ones, who is just he's a sociopath. Like he really like gets off on humiliating and belittling whoever is in his courtroom. But even so, like in this case, I think this was a Gagnon 2 hearing, if I recall correctly, or a sentencing hearing. But like more often than not, in this case, and so often, it's just people with mental health problems. It's just people with recurrent drug problems who are just not getting the support that they need. They're not being put into programs. And if they are put into programs, they're put in somewhere extremely far away from home with no form of public transportation. So Lord knows if you want to meet your family and you need to bus across the city, I'm sure all of you know how long it takes to get across a river here in Pittsburgh. It is ridiculous. Not to mention, this is something I found out like a little bit before this, which was really maddening to me and goes on to what Dolly was saying about probation, which is that you have to pay for your own ankle monitor, like, which is crazy. Like, you have to pay for your own ankle monitor, and judges don't care how much income you have. I've witnessed a judge saying, like, with regard to ankle monitors, with regard to restitution, forget your car payments, forget your rent, your daughter needs to go to daycare, forget about that, pay your restitution first. As though people don't deserve childcare, as if people don't deserve housing or, you know, the ability to be transported across this city. Like I said, it's really a standard, like it's really a weird moral standard. This is my sketch of Mariani, who is, like I said, he's an awful human being. And this is one of the things he loves to do, which is really common, which is that he makes fun of the food that people have to eat in jail. He loves to bring that up like again and again with people. He loves to make fun of them. One time someone came in with a uniform on for the SJU, which is solitary confinement. And he asked him, you know, like, why are you in solitary? First of all, he laughed at him because the SJU uniform is stripes, it's black and white stripes, and the other uniforms are red. And he stood there and he laughed at him for wearing stripes. And then he asked him why he was in solitary. And the guy was like, Your Honor, I could not tell you. I do not know. No one is telling me why I'm in solitary confinement, and I've been here for 2 weeks. And he laughed at that because for some reason that's funny. It's not funny. It's someone's life. It's the way that like here this is another good one. The way that judges kind of see this as like not someone's whole entire life, not the fact that incarcerating them for an indefinite amount of time is derailing their entire life and causing undue trauma to their families. No, some judges will just talk about bread tags and what color bread tag means what on what day of the week. They really, it's really like shocking to me. And like I'd been coming and expecting some sort of like shittiness, you know, because it is the criminal justice system and we do incarcerate people unduly, but I really wasn't expecting it to be this blatant, to the point where like the judge makes jokes in the courtroom and all the other lawyers laugh. People's families are sitting there stone-faced, you know, waiting for their sentencing, whether or not they'll get to see someone they love in another few years. And the judges just it's just like, it's like fun to them. It's really like, and this is why I think like, not only is court watch important for like greater society, but I think everyone needs to have eyes on the court, or everyone deserves to see what happens ambiently in a courtroom, not just in their own case, but in general. Because I can't imagine, like I am lucky enough to not having ever gone to a courtroom because of a crime that I've been charged with. And I'm lucky that I wasn't born in a very poor like environment. But if like, the way that this system works is that there's no recognition of whether or not you're poor. There's no recognition of your humanity outside of this courtroom. You are just person number 24226. You did this, literally this code in the law, and this is how long we're going to like put you in for. It's the reduction of humanity into numbers and in so many ways that is so maddening that I think, again, court watch is amazing. I want as many people to court watch as much as possible, because there are so many judges out here doing so many shitty things that no one ever lays eyes on, or people see it and they just don't care. They just want to come in, get their case done, go home and fucking cash a check. Like that's basically it. It is ridiculous. And I'm very passionate about this. If I didn't work a 9 to 5, I'd be court watching all the time. It's really, really, really messed up in here. But yeah, that's my statement, and you can look at my sketches and I'll upload these online someday.
Yeah, these sketches are very, very telling of what you've experienced in your time as a court watcher. I can't believe how blatant some of the things that you've seen have been, how disrespectful and how dehumanizing. I'm honestly shocked. I do have a question. Have you noticed any change in any judges' behavior since the Court Watch program started? Knowing that you're there, have you seen any judges kind of take a step back from that?
Yeah, well, Mariani is the one who I've noticed the most change in. He like, you know, we've been on his ass for a while, honestly. And like when I was watching him throughout the pandemic where what is shining? I'm sorry, something is shining on me. Oh, it's my earring. When I was watching him throughout the pandemic, I remember there was one day we were all in for a particular hearing. I think it was for one of the activists that had been charged during the Black Lives Matter uprisings in 2020. And he definitely took notice of that. But what I really took notice of was when I was in the courts and I came in real life. And I had noticed that on the sign-in sheet, I had to like sign in, someone else was there for my LC. And he would like look over in our direction. And then when he did make jokes and when he did make comments, he would make them only audibly enough so his clerks could hear. They're all, judges in the common pleas court are literally up on a throne behind clear glass. Like, I don't know if I have a good sketch of this, but like they are quite literally up on a high horse above everybody. So there is enough distance from the rest of the court that you can just like only mutter to your clerks, and then, you know, your clerks work under you. I can't find a good picture, but like their judges are literally in a throne, like not in like a throne, but they have a wooden chair that's like padded, that has like a seal for the state of Pennsylvania with a mural of the Pennsylvania state seal above them, like a like some sort of Your Majesty sort of situation. I haven't watched many more judges like in real life other than Mariani, especially since I started this job. But I mean, Mariani is the one who we've been on about the most, and it's because he's so crass. I think he started to take notice that we take notice of his disgusting comments.
I'm sure being in person too has a different impact than people watching on Teams, on Microsoft Teams, actually seeing bodies in the courtroom, taking note of what you're saying and doing. I'm sure has a bigger impact.
Yeah. And also as a court watcher, I mean, when you're in a courtroom, like people are led there in chains. You hear their chains rattling. They're like their legs are chained together. Their hands are chained to their waist. It's like, it's jarring that they're like held in a separate room. You're not allowed to see them until they get 5 minutes of trial, and then that's it. Maybe, you know, it ranges, but like they don't get their humanity. They don't, it's like they don't deserve it in this courtroom.
Yeah, that's awful. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's very important. I'm going to move into a couple of other questions. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time to drop them in the chat or the Q&A box. We have one question. Can you explain what a docket report is a little more?
Sure, yeah, I can rush through that. So it's basically just a public report of statistics around demographics related to arrests. So the docket, maybe Dolly could actually explain this a little better, but it's basically a formal court document laying out charges and all other kinds of, technical details about your case. So what we do is those are made public, but only for a very brief period of time. So we have a system, and we're working with, I think it's some Carnegie Mellon students, to systematically automate a process whereby we just grab everything that's uploaded every day and then just conglomerate it and put it into a very fancy database that we can look at. And from there, we can look at statistics and filter it different ways to analyze the data, and then put those together and then share them with the public. So that's what our docket report is.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Another question. Are there any notable actions that have been taken against unfair court proceedings or judges as a result of notes taken by court watchers?
I'm not sure how much has been filed yet. Like Dolly said before, we're in the process of putting together a variety of different strategies using court watcher notes. I won't go into too much detail, just for the sake of the litigation itself. But for certain, there will be more to come incorporating that, and some of it has been made public. But keep your eyes peeled.
Great.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I just wanted to add that, I mean, Josh did already mention like a lot of some of the like court watch wins, but in addition to that, when we do see like particularly problematic cases where we think like an attorney can help, we do refer those cases to attorneys, sometimes outside of our organization. And you know, a lot of the times that has resulted in that person being able to leave jail, or with sometimes connecting them with resources to pay off their, you know, $700 fine that has been keeping them on probation for over a decade. That was one instance. So like that, obviously, we don't in terms of large scale litigation, there's only so much we can discuss, but like there are a lot of like small things we can do too in terms of just connecting folks with resources.
Yeah, and I feel like being aware is honestly a very important piece. We have another question about COVID protocols in the courtroom. Is there still masking? Are there any other COVID protocols that we should be aware of?
I guess I can take this one. Yeah, people can. So as of, I don't know when it started, but the mask mandate is no longer in effect in
Okay.
courts. So most people are unmasked. Judges are pretty much always unmasked, even before the mask mandate ended.
Well, they're up on their throne, so
right.
they're
Yeah.
far away from the jurors.
Yeah, same with like the cops who are around the building. Some of them before the mask mandate was lifted, where I've overheard so many conversations where they're just like disparaging like the use of masks, and like can't wait for it to end in schools and in the courtroom. So it's definitely not the safest environment for folks, which is a whole other level of accessibility issues.
Yeah.
And
This is part of the reason why we're trying to again push for return to remote access, because again, the courts have the entire infrastructure already set up. They've got the cameras, they've got the microphones. They could probably improve the process by which they actually get people into the Microsoft Teams rooms, but it's all there and ready to go. But you know, again, so much of the court system is geared toward the convenience of the people, of court staff and judges, you know, not so much toward accessibility for the public. So, you know, it's going to take some pushing, but, you know, that is something that we're striving for. And in the meantime, we, of course, do encourage our court watchers who are going downtown to wear their masks and stay away from everybody else. Sit in a little corner if you can and take your notes. But yeah, it's a bad situation. It's a bad situation.
I also wanted to, sorry to keep jumping. Oh, sorry. Do I have time to add to that?
Yes, please do.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to add two things. One, that other jurisdictions have continued remote access with no problem. And two, that they still use remote access when it's convenient for them. So lawyers are, you know, they log into Microsoft Teams, they use it to contact people for people in the jail to communicate. Sometimes even like litigants themselves or witnesses, judges will give them that option. So they're still using the infrastructure. So really the only reason that makes sense for them to deny access is because they don't want the public to see what's going on.
Unfortunately, that makes sense.
It does. And you know what? It absolutely does. Yeah.
I did. This is Donna again. I had a question. In your presentation, Josh, you talked about one of the judges that was removed from the bench and what a hard process that was to actually get that done. And as far as like other judges that are doing like egregious things, is there any accountability for when you see something that is just absolutely wrong? Is there any punishment or accountability that those judges have to submit to?
Well, Dolly can maybe talk about the more formal aspects of it, but I will say, you know, in general, no. You know, the Mark Tranquilli case was very unique because he used a very explicit slur in closed doors and therefore became a liability to the courts that they just couldn't deny. Whereas, you know, the rest of these people, even people like Mariani, he's been doing this for years. He's very old. He's been in the courts for a long, long, long time. And he's been doing this behavior, which is why he feels so confident in it. As far as, you know, like simple, straightforward accountability, largely no. Again, this is the problem that judges just have too much power in general and too much discretion. But, you know, I mean, perhaps the most direct way that you can do is call their chambers and tell them that you've heard about what they've been doing and it's terrible. I mean, you know, these people are elected officials. They ostensibly are here to serve the public. So, you know, I would encourage people to just like call them and tell them that you think that their behavior is reprehensible. You can do that. But outside of that, maybe Dolly, you can say a few things about the possibilities of formal complaints.
Yeah, sure. So there is, like, judges are supposed to follow a code of judicial conduct that ranges from, them not being allowed to violate the law or do anything really egregious to even they need to be courteous to people in their courtroom. So a whole range of things in there that they routinely violate. And so in theory, there's a judicial conduct board that, reviews complaints and does investigation and files formal charges, but they rarely do that. I forget the exact number, but they've only filed a few charges after having received hundreds of complaints in like the past year or so. And so it's really not a super effective process, but like Josh said, I think honestly, bad press is much more effective than going through the proper channels. And I mean, having court watchers in the room is like a great way to have that ammo to give to a reporter, especially if it's more than just one instance of like one questionable thing, and you can show a pattern of this is a routine thing, then that's a lot more powerful. And you can go through the proper channels and also go the bad press route. They're not mutually exclusive, and advocacy, of course. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So in light of finding out that the courtroom may not be the safest place for those of us who are immunocompromised or just don't feel comfortable being in an environment where no COVID precautions are in place, are there other ways that folks can support ALC and this program without having to go into the courtroom?
Yes, absolutely. Quite a few of our court watchers, like for instance, Darius is starting this new job as a 9 to 5, can't necessarily make it into the courts regularly. But there's still lots of ways that you can help out behind the scenes. I work with volunteers who help me do scheduling, right? We communicate with volunteers about their availability. We get them logged into spreadsheets, we send them reminder emails, lots of logistical things that I could use help with. So if you're the kind of person, or you have a job where you are in front of a computer and you have the flexibility to check spreadsheets, that's a great, that's very useful, because we can work together, monitor text messages and get people scheduled. There's different projects you can work on. We have volunteers write for our blog. Lots of law students are interested in particular different little facets. There's so much wrong to write about and to expose. So there's lots of research initiatives that you can do that we want to support you in. We're working with a volunteer right now who's a food life coach, not a nutritionist, but in that realm, working on a project about the conditions of food at the jail. That all got started just because they watched the court watch orientation and wanted to get involved and had a specific skill set. So there's lots of things that you can do that we may not even know might be a good idea to try out. Other than that, especially people who feel like, they are, the proactive type to really like work on projects on their own and just like be in communication. Those people are like, even if they can't court watch, those are the people who really help us get initiatives going, especially right now. We're looking to, I wanted to do more around making a push toward pressuring the courts to restart remote access. And I'm looking to try to get in contact, just get a volunteer who's available to, call up judges' chambers at the magisterial level, call up the 46 districts and say, is this judge willing to start remote access of their own volition? And if not, why? And, even if they just like stonewall us, we can have a record of that and then put that together and make a push for that and not front. So there's lots of different stuff and organizing stuff. We're very flexible. And again, because we see the whole system as quite large, all the way from policing to the prisons, that there's lots of stuff to work on. So absolutely, anybody can get in here, even if you can't get in the courts.
Josh, would you mind dropping your email in the chat so that people who may want to get in touch with you about volunteering in other ways could do so? And then I know we're a little bit over, but I just want to ask this one last question. Have you built any relationships with judges who show some support? have you come across judges? that
You know, we do our director Autumn, you know, has a relationship with court administrators and quite a few of the Collins judges. You know, she goes to meetings and each of them she's met with President Judge Kim Clark. So they're aware of us and we have a working relationship with quite a few of them. And especially at the magisterial district level, there are a slate of newer who were just elected progressive judges who have made a point of specifically instituting bail setting practices that are aimed at harm reduction and keeping people out of the system. I'm not going to go into naming names because we are a 501c3 and I don't want to go about endorsing anybody in particular. But yeah, for sure, there are judges that we work with. We're not purely aggro, though we do enjoy being aggro on occasion when it's called for.
Great. Well, thank you. This has been awesome. Just a reminder to everyone attending, there is a volunteer session on Monday at 6 p.m. So click on that link that's in the chat and we will send those links out tomorrow with the recording of this for you to refer back to. And I will drop my email in the chat. If any questions come to mind that you would like any of our panelists to answer, feel free to email them to me and we'll get you some answers. And thank you again for being with us tonight. This has been great.
Really, really wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle, for putting it together, and thanks to SJRC and for Daria and Dolly for making it.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone.
Great. Bye.